The day I discovered my son Derek had been monitoring my grocery purchases was the day I realized how completely I'd surrendered my autonomy. "Mom, why did you spend $75 at Whole Foods yesterday?" he asked during our weekly Sunday dinner, scrolling through my credit card statement on his phone. "That organic stuff is overpriced. You should be shopping at Value Mart instead." My daughter-in-law Vanessa nodded in agreement, adding, "We're just trying to help you stretch your retirement savings." Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat there frozen, fork suspended halfway to my mouth. A retired teacher with 32 years of experience managing not only classroom budgets but an entire department's finances, and here I was, being lectured about a $75 grocery bill like I was a teenager who'd maxed out her first credit card. It wasn't just humiliating. It was the moment I finally saw the invisible cage I'd allowed to be built around me. What Derek didn't know, what I'd kept hidden through months of his increasing financial guidance, was that Robert hadn't just left me our modest home in Lake Oswego when he passed. My late husband, always the quiet planner, had built a substantial investment portfolio that would have solved all the cash flow problems Derek was so concerned about. More importantly, that portfolio contained the seed money that had launched Derek's now thriving tech startup, Future Fund Solutions. That day, I decided to reclaim not just my financial freedom, but my dignity. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to withdraw my investment from my son's business. I never intended to become so financially entangled with my son. After Robert died 5 years ago, I thought I was doing fine managing on my own. I had my teacher's pension, our mortgage was nearly paid off, and I'd even started traveling a bit, something Robert and I had always planned to do together in retirement. That changed when Derek and Vanessa invited me over for dinner 18 months ago. They'd prepared an elaborate meal, and Derek seemed uncharacteristically attentive, refilling my wine glass before it was even half empty. After dessert, he pulled out a folder filled with printouts. "Mom, I've been looking at your finances," he said, spreading papers across the table. "And I'm concerned." I remember staring at him, confused. "My finances? Derek, how did you even—" "Dad shared all the account information with me before he passed," Derek explained, which wasn't entirely true. Robert had given Derek emergency access information, not permission to scrutinize my spending. "Your retirement accounts aren't growing the way they should be. At this rate, you'll outlive your savings." Vanessa leaned forward, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "We're worried you'll end up having to sell the house, Barbara." I should have seen it for what it was, the beginning of a gradual takeover. Instead, I felt touched by their concern. My son, the successful entrepreneur, wanted to help his mother secure her financial future. What mother wouldn't feel proud? That night, I agreed to let Derek consolidate my finances. Within weeks, he'd transferred my accounts to his financial advisor, switched my credit cards to ones where he could monitor transactions, and set up auto payments for my bills through an account he could access. He called it streamlining. I called it helpful at first. I didn't know then that my monthly allowance was significantly less than what my accounts could have provided. Derek insisted this conservative approach was protecting my nest egg, and I believed him. Throughout this process, I remained Derek's biggest champion. When he launched Future Fund Solutions 3 years ago, he'd come to me, outlining his vision for a financial technology platform that would revolutionize retirement planning for middle-class Americans. The idea resonated with me. I'd watched too many of my fellow teachers struggle with inadequate retirement planning. "I need some initial investors, Mom," he'd said. "People who believe in what we're building." Without hesitation, I wrote him a check for $250,000, nearly half of the liquid assets Robert had left me. Derek promised it would double, even triple within a few years. I didn't even ask for formal paperwork. He was my son, after all. When he asked me not to mention the investment to anyone, including Vanessa, I agreed, assuming it was just business. Discretion. For the next year, I devoted my time to helping Derek's business succeed however I could. I attended every product launch and networking event. I spent weekends stuffing envelopes for marketing campaigns. I even used my connections in the educational sector to arrange meetings with school district financial officers who might be interested in his platform. When Derek and Vanessa complained about their long commute from their suburban apartment, I suggested they move into my home temporarily while they looked for a place closer to his office. 6 months stretched into a year. They took over the master bedroom. "You don't need all this space, Mom," relegating me to the smaller guest room. I prepared their meals, did their laundry, and kept the house in perfect order while they worked. Long hours. I even watched their dog, Winston, a high-maintenance French bulldog who required special food and medications that I gladly paid for. When they finally found a sleek downtown condo, I helped with the down payment. Another $50,000 that Derek assured me was just a loan until the business really takes off. Then came the suggestion that I should simplify my life. "The house is too much for you to maintain, Mom," Derek would say. "Think about downsizing." Each time I'd smile and change the subject. The house where I'd raised Derek, where Robert and I had built our life together, it wasn't just real estate to me. My friend Carol noticed the changes before I did. We were having coffee at Pacific Coffee Shop, our regular Tuesday spot, when she commented on my hesitation to order a pastry. "Since when do you worry about spending $5 on a muffin?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Oh, I'm just trying to be more budget conscious," I replied. Carol's eyes narrowed. "Barbara, you've been bringing your own tea bags to restaurants and declining dinner invitations for months now. What's really going on?" I brushed it off, but her question lingered. That evening, I decided to check my investment accounts, something I'd stopped doing regularly since Derek took over. When I tried to log in, I discovered the password had been changed. I called the bank, only to learn that my accounts now required Derek's authorization for any information to be released. Still, I defended him to Carol and others. "He's just protecting me," I'd say. Financial scams targeting seniors are so common these days. I believed I was lucky to have such a caring son. My devotion to Derek extended to his business as well. When Future Fund Solutions faced a cash flow problem last year, Derek came to me again. "It's just a temporary shortfall while we wait for our next round of funding," he explained. "We need another $100,000 to tide us over." I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank the next day and took out a home equity line of credit, something I'd never done in all my years of homeownership. The paperwork listed Derek as an authorized user for convenience, which seemed reasonable at the time. What I didn't know then was that Derek had already secured his next round of funding. The $100,000 wasn't going to save the business. It was financing the luxury vehicle he drove home the following month, a sleek Tesla with all the upgrades. "It's important for client perception," he explained when I expressed surprise. "No one trusts their money to someone driving a Toyota." I nodded, swallowing my concerns. After all, he was the business expert, not me. Every Sunday, Derek and Vanessa would invite me to dinner at their condo. These meals became a ritual of subtle humiliation, though I didn't recognize it as such at first. They would review my weekly expenses, questioning purchases and suggesting cheaper alternatives. Why was I still paying for premium cable channels? Did I really need to buy brand-name cereal? Couldn't I find a less expensive hairdresser? "We're just helping you avoid the financial mistakes so many retirees make," Derek would say, as if I hadn't successfully managed household finances for decades before he was even born. The control extended beyond money. When I mentioned wanting to visit my sister in Arizona, Derek immediately objected. "That's not in your travel budget this quarter, Mom. Besides, Who's going to water the plants and check the mail while you're gone? I canceled the trip. When I expressed interest in taking a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do, Vanessa suggested I find free tutorials on YouTube instead. Those community center classes are overpriced, she said. And honestly, Barbara, at your age, starting new hobbies isn't the best use of resources. At your age. Those 3 words became a frequent refrain, wielded like a weapon whenever I expressed a desire for anything beyond the narrowest definition of necessity. Despite everything, I continued supporting Derek's business however I could. I attended investor dinners, proudly introducing myself as Derek's mom, sharing stories of his childhood entrepreneurial spirit, the lemonade stands and lawn mowing businesses that foreshadowed his current success. I baked cookies for his office team during late nights. I rearranged my schedule whenever he needed me to drop something off at the office or pick up lunch for an important client meeting. I believed in him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I believed in his vision, and I believed that my sacrifices were contributing to something meaningful, not just for Derek, but for all the people his financial platform would eventually help. Then came the quarterly board meeting Derek invited me to attend. Just as an observer, he said. Since you're an investor, you should see how we operate. I wore my best outfit and arrived early, excited to finally see the business in action. Derek introduced me briefly to the other board members, but seated me in the back corner, away from the main table. I didn't mind. I was just happy to be included. As the financial statements were distributed, I noticed something odd. The investor breakdown showed a family trust contribution of only $100,000, not the $350,000 I had actually invested. When I mentioned this to Derek during a break, his face hardened. "Not now, Mom," he whispered harshly. "That's just how we structure the paperwork for regulatory purposes. I'll explain later." He never did explain. When I brought it up on the drive home, he deflected, talking instead about how I needed to cut back on my electricity usage. "Your utility bills are still too high for a single person," he said. That night, I lay awake wondering if I'd misunderstood something fundamental about my investment. The next morning, I called Martin Green, an old friend of Robert's who worked as a financial advisor. I asked if he could help me understand some investment documents. "Of course," Martin said. "Why don't you bring them by my office?" That's when I discovered I had no documents, no formal investment agreement, no certificate of shares, nothing that legally proved my substantial contribution to future fund solutions. Just canceled checks and bank withdrawals. Still, I hesitated to confront Derek directly. He was my son. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Instead, I started paying closer attention to the business news about Future Fund. I subscribed to the local business journal and created a Google alert for any mentions of the company. What I found shocked me. 3 separate articles described the company as entirely self-funded by founder Derek Wilson. One profile piece quoted him saying, "I didn't take the easy route of bringing in outside investors too early. I believed in bootstrapping to maintain my vision." No mention of his mother's $350,000 contribution. No acknowledgement of the home equity loan that kept the company afloat during its difficult period. According to the public narrative, Derek had built everything through his own tenacity and brilliance. Even then, I made excuses for him. Perhaps he was simplifying for the media. Perhaps he wanted to appear more self-made to attract bigger investors. Perhaps it was just good business strategy. The final straw wasn't any single grand betrayal, but rather the accumulation of small indignities. It was Derek questioning a $14 purchase at a bookstore. It was Vanessa suggesting I should sell my wedding ring since it's just sitting in a drawer collecting dust. It was Derek helping me draft a new will that significantly favored him over his sister, who lived out of state. And yes, it was. That Sunday dinner when Derek questioned my $75 grocery purchase at Whole Foods, scrolling through my credit card statement on his phone as casually as if it were his own. Something snapped inside me that evening. On the drive home, I found myself taking a detour to Carol's house. It was late, but I knew she'd be up. When she answered the door in her robe, one look at my face told her everything. "It's time we had a serious talk," she said, ushering me inside. Over tea at her kitchen table, I finally told her everything. The investment, the control, the growing realization that I'd been manipulated by my own son. "Barbara," Carol said gently, "this isn't just financial mismanagement. This is financial abuse." The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent my teaching career alert for signs of abuse in my students. How had I failed to recognize it in my own life? "What do I do?" I whispered. Carol's answer was simple. "You take back your power, one step at a time." The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer Carol recommended, someone who specialized in elder financial issues. I spent the weekend gathering every financial record I could find, creating a timeline of investments and loans to Derek and his business. The lawyer confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Without proper documentation, recovering my investment would be difficult. "But not impossible," she added, seeing my crestfallen expression. "What's the first step?" I asked. "Financial separation," she said. "New accounts, new cards, new passwords, and most importantly, new boundaries." That afternoon, I went to First Citizens Bank across town, not the branch Derek used, and opened new accounts. I applied for a new credit card solely in my name, using my excellent credit score that Derek had inadvertently maintained through his management of my finances. I changed the email address associated with all my financial accounts to a new one Derek didn't know about. Small steps, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The most difficult part was yet to come. I needed to confront Derek about the investment and establish that I wouldn't be controlled any longer. But I wasn't ready for a direct confrontation, not yet. I needed leverage, something to strengthen my position when the moment came. That leverage arrived unexpectedly the following week. I was helping at a fundraising event for my old school district when I overheard two men discussing future fund solutions. One of them was Jason Martinez, Derek's business partner. "Derek's presenting to Westridge Investments next week," Jason was saying. "If they commit, we'll have the capital to expand nationally." I recognized the name Westridge Investments from Derek's conversations. This was the big institutional investor he'd been courting for months, the one that could transform Future Fund from a regional player to a national brand. I approached Jason after his conversation ended, introducing myself as Derek's mother. His face lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Wilson, Derek talks about you all the time." Jason seemed genuinely pleased to meet me. "Your support has meant everything to him." I smiled, sensing an opportunity. "I try to stay involved. I'm so proud of what you're building together." We chatted about the business, and Jason, perhaps assuming I already knew the details, mentioned the upcoming presentation to Westridge Investments. "It's the final step before they commit $3 million in Series A funding," he explained. "The term sheet is basically done, but they want one more presentation from the founders. Derek's been preparing for weeks." I nodded, absorbing this valuable information. "That's wonderful news. When exactly is the presentation?" "Next Thursday at 2 p.m. at their downtown offices," Jason replied. I thanked him for the information and said I'd be sure to wish Derek luck. As I walked away, I was already formulating a plan. The next Sunday dinner at Derek and Vanessa's condo proceeded as usual. They critiqued my spending, suggested I cancel my newspaper subscription. "You can read everything online for free, Mom," and reminded me that the house needed expensive repairs. "Have you thought more about listing it?" Derek asked casually. "The spring market is heating up." I smiled and changed the subject. For once, I felt calm during their financial inquisition. I knew something they didn't know. I had begun to take back control. Over the next few days, I met again with my lawyer and then with Martin Green, the financial advisor. Armed with their advice, I prepared for the most important conversation of my life. Thursday arrived. At precisely 1 p.m., 1 hour before Derek's crucial presentation to Westridge Investments, I walked into the offices of Future Fund Solutions for the first time in months. The receptionist greeted me warmly. Everyone there knew Derek's mom. "Is Derek available?" I asked. "I need just a few minutes of his time." She looked uncomfortable. "He's preparing for a big meeting, Mrs. Wilson. He's asked not to be disturbed." I smiled reassuringly. "I know all about the Westridge meeting. This will only take 5 minutes, and it's quite important." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she directed me to Derek's office. When I entered, he was standing behind his desk, straightening his tie in a small mirror. He looked annoyed. "Mom, this really isn't a good time. I have the most important meeting of my career in less than an hour." "I know," I said calmly, taking a seat across from his desk without being invited. "With Westridge Investments, for $3 million in Series Busine of funding." Derek froze, his hand still on his tie. "How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know about my investments," I replied. His expression shifted from annoyance to calculation. He sat down, glancing at his watch. "What's this about, Mom? I really don't have time for—" I placed a folder on his desk. "This is a formal request for documentation of my $350,000 investment in Future Fund Solutions. My lawyer has prepared it." "Your lawyer?" Derek's voice rose slightly. "Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since I realized I needed one to protect my interests," I said. "This document requests proof of my equity position and copies of all financial statements from the company's founding to present." Derek's face flushed. "Mom, we've been through this. Your contribution was structured as a family loan, not an equity investment, for tax purposes." I nodded, as if considering this explanation. "That's fine. Then I'll need loan documentation showing the terms, interest rate, and repayment schedule. My lawyer has included that request as an alternative." "This is ridiculous," Derek snapped, pushing the folder away without opening it. "I don't have time for this nonsense right now. I have a meeting that will make this company worth 10 times what it is today." "I'm aware," I said. "And I wonder what Westridge Investments would think if they knew the company's origin story was incomplete." Derek's eyes widened. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating facts. You've publicly claimed Future Fund was entirely self-funded. You've erased my contribution from the narrative. I'm simply suggesting that potential investors might be concerned about such creative accounting." "You wouldn't dare," he whispered. I met his gaze steadily. "I've already drafted the email to Westridge's managing partner. It's ready to send." I held up my phone. "But I'd prefer not to." The color drained from Derek's face. He glanced at his watch again, then at the door, as if expecting Jason to walk in at any moment. Finally, he looked back at me, seeing me. Really, seeing me for the first time in months. "What do you want?" he asked. I laid out my terms clearly. First, immediate recognition of my investment, either as equity or as a formal loan with interest. Second, complete restoration of my financial independence, new account access, return of my credit cards, and removal of his name from my accounts. Third, a formal role on the advisory board of Future Fund Solutions. "You have 15 minutes to decide," I said, setting a timer on my phone. After that, I send the email. Derek stared at me for a long moment, shock giving way to a grudging respect. "You've thought this through." "I've had plenty of time to think," I replied. "While you were monitoring my grocery purchases and questioning my coffee spending." He flinched at that. For a moment, I saw a flicker of shame cross his face. Then he reached for the folder and opened it. "I'll sign this," he said. "But the board position is complicated. I can't just—" "You're the CEO and majority shareholder," I interrupted. "You can do whatever you feel is in the best interest of the company." I paused, letting the implications sink in. And right now, having me as an ally rather than an adversary is very much in the company's best interest. Derek looked at me with new eyes, not as his mother who could be manipulated, but as a formidable adversary who held real power. It was a look I hadn't seen from him since he was a teenager, testing boundaries and discovering I wasn't as easily swayed as he'd hoped. "I'll need a few days to get the paperwork in order," he said finally. I shook my head. "You'll sign this. Acknowledgement today. The formal documentation can follow within the week." I stood up, gathering my purse. "I believe you have a presentation to finish preparing for. I won't take any more of your time." As I turned to leave, Derek called after me. "Mom, wait." His voice had lost its edge of calculation. I didn't mean for things to get so—" I waited, but he couldn't seem to find the right words to complete that sentence. "Didn't mean for things to get so controlling? So manipulative? So disrespectful?" "We'll talk after your meeting," I said. "Good luck with Westridge. I genuinely hope it goes well." I walked out of his office with my head high, nodding to the startled receptionist as I passed. Outside, standing on the sidewalk in downtown Portland, I took a deep breath of the cool, damp air. Rain was beginning to fall, typical Portland weather, but I didn't mind. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt clean, renewed, free. I had confronted my son, reclaimed my investment, and most importantly, restored my dignity. There would be difficult conversations ahead, boundaries to establish, trust to rebuild, if that was even possible. But I had taken the first crucial step. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Carol. "How did it go?" I smiled. As I typed my reply, "I remembered who I am." The confrontation with Derek at his office marked a turning point, but the real battle was just beginning. I left the Future Fund Solutions building with a signed acknowledgement in my purse, but I was under no illusion that this single document would solve everything. Derek was calculating. He would regroup, strategize, and find new angles to maintain control. I needed to prepare for the counterattack. I drove directly to Carol's house, where Martin Green, my financial advisor, was waiting. When I showed them the signed document, Martin nodded approvingly. "This is legally binding enough to establish your claim," he said. "Now we need to build on this momentum before Derek can reassess." I'd taken the first step toward reclaiming my financial independence, but I still felt unsteady, like I was walking on unfamiliar terrain. For nearly 2 years, I'd allowed Derek to make every significant financial decision for me. The prospect of managing my own affairs again was both liberating and terrifying. "What happens next?" I asked. Carol squeezed my hand. "You start living on your terms again." The following morning, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was Vanessa, her voice tight, with barely contained anger. "We need to talk," she said flatly. "Derek told me what happened yesterday. I agreed to meet them for coffee at a neutral location, a busy cafe downtown where the public setting might discourage dramatics. When I arrived, Derek and Vanessa were already seated at a corner table, both dressed in business attire, looking more like they were preparing for a corporate negotiation than a family discussion. "Mom," Derek began as soon as I sat down, "I think you misunderstood some things. I signed that paper under duress, with a critical meeting looming. You used that pressure point to your advantage. I sipped my coffee calmly. I merely pointed out reality, Derek. If stating facts constitutes duress, then perhaps the facts themselves are the problem. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression pinched. Barbara, we've only ever wanted what's best for you. Everything we've done, monitoring, your spending, consolidating your accounts, it was all to protect you. From what exactly? I asked. From myself? From the independence I managed just fine for 60 years before you decided I was incompetent? Derek flinched at the word incompetent. No one ever said that. You didn't need to say it. Your actions spoke clearly enough. I pulled out a small notebook where I'd been documenting incidents over the past month. On March 5th, you questioned my $22 purchase at the garden center. On March 12th, you told me I couldn't afford to fix the broken step on my porch, despite my having adequate funds. On March 19th, you refused to approve a $150 withdrawal from my own savings account because you didn't like the reason I gave for needing it. I looked up from my notes. Would you treat any competent adult this way? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Those examples are taken out of context. Then provide the context, Derek. Explain to me why a 60-year-old woman with no cognitive impairments needs her son's permission to buy petunias. The cafe had grown busy around us, the morning rush filling the space with the comforting white noise of conversation and espresso machines. A young barista delivered the muffin I'd ordered, smiling warmly before returning to the counter. Vanessa cleared her throat. Barbara, you need to understand our perspective. When we looked at your financial situation after Robert died, we saw concerning patterns. Your expenses were exceeding your income. You were making emotional spending decisions. Someone needed to step in. I nodded slowly. That's partially true. I was grieving. I made some impulsive purchases in those first few months after losing Robert. But grief isn't incompetence, and temporary emotional spending doesn't justify 2 years of financial captivity. Derek's expression hardened. Financial captivity? That's absurd. We were helping you. By making me ask permission to buy a book? By questioning every coffee shop visit? By making me account for every dollar like a child with an allowance? I shook my head. That's not help, Derek. That's control. A tense silence fell over the table. I could see Derek calculating, reassessing his approach. He'd always been like this, even as a child. When one strategy failed, he'd quickly pivot to another. I braced myself for whatever came next. Mom, he said finally, his voice softening. The Westridge meeting went well. Really well. They're committing the full $3 million, plus an option for $2 million more if we hit certain growth targets. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by this change of subject. That's wonderful news. Congratulations. This means Future Fund will be valued at nearly $15 million. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Your investment, if we structure it as equity like you want, would be worth almost $1 million on paper. There it was, the new angle. When intimidation failed, try enticement. That's assuming a lot, Derek. Startup valuations are notoriously speculative. I smiled, enjoying the flicker of surprise that crossed his face. He hadn't expected me to understand venture capital terminology. But I'm glad the company is doing well. My point is, he continued, recovering quickly, fighting with us right now could jeopardize everything. If word gets out that there's internal conflict over the company's founding capital, it could spook Westridge. They might pull out entirely. Vanessa nodded earnestly. Think about your investment, Barbara. Don't you want it to grow? Now isn't the time to create problems. I considered their words carefully. They were suggesting I should continue to accept their control over my finances for the sake of the business. My investment would grow if I just stayed quiet and compliant. It was manipulation, thinly disguised as financial advice. I'm not creating problems, I said finally. I'm solving one. A problem you created when you decided to treat my investment as your personal funding without proper documentation, and when you began controlling my personal finances beyond any reasonable level of help. Derek's expression darkened. So, what exactly do you want? To tank the company out of spite? No. I want what I outlined yesterday. Recognition of my investment, restoration of my financial independence, and a formal role with the company. The first 2 points are negotiable, Derek conceded, but having you on the advisory board is out of the question. You don't have the tech or finance background necessary. I felt a flare of indignation. I managed a department budget of over $2 million for 15 years as head of the science department. I served on the district's financial oversight committee, and I ran the household finances while your father built his career. That's not the same as understanding venture-backed tech startups, Vanessa interjected. This is a specialized field. I'm not asking to become your CFO, I replied. But as an investor who provided seed capital, I deserve representation and transparency. Derek drummed his fingers on the table, clearly frustrated. Look, here's what I can offer. We'll formalize your investment with proper documentation. We'll restore your independent access to your accounts. But the advisory board position is non-negotiable. The best I can do is invite you to quarterly investor updates. I considered the compromise. It addressed my main concerns but still minimized my role in the company I'd helped create. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a message. It was from Martin. Don't agree to anything definitive without having me review it first. Smiled and put my phone away. I'll need any agreement in writing, reviewed by my financial advisor and attorney before I sign. Derek's eyebrows shot up. You're really bringing lawyers into this? We're family. Yes, we are, I agreed. And families should treat each other with respect and honesty. When that faltered, I needed additional advocates. The tension at the table was palpable. Vanessa's perfect composure had begun to crack, a muscle twitching near her eye. Derek looked both angry and bewildered, as if he couldn't quite believe. His mother was standing her ground. Fine, he said finally. I'll have our company attorney draft something. But Mom, you need to understand something. Dad asked me to look after you. On his deathbed, he made me promise I'd make sure you were taken care of financially. I felt a surge of emotion, anger mingled with sadness. Don't you dare use your father that way, Derek. Robert never asked you to control me. He asked you to support me if I needed it. There's a world of difference between those two things. Our conversation was interrupted by Derek's phone ringing. He glanced at it and stood abruptly. I need to take this. It's Jason. He stepped away from the table, leaving me alone with Vanessa. I expected her to continue the pressure campaign, but instead, she surprised me with a sudden shift in demeanor. Barbara, she said quietly, leaning forward. I know we've had our differences, but I want you to know I actually admire what you're doing. I blinked in surprise. You do? She nodded, glancing over to make sure Derek was still engaged in his phone call. My mother never stood up for herself with my father. He controlled every aspect of her life until the day he died. She never had her own bank account, her own credit card, not even her own email address. This unexpected vulnerability from Vanessa caught me completely off guard. In the 2 years since she'd married Derek, I'd never seen beneath her polished exterior. I didn't know that, I said. When Derek started managing your finances, I saw parallels to my parents' relationship that bothered me. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. But I didn't say anything. I told myself it was different because Derek was trying to help you, not control you. The line between help and control can blur easily, I observed. Vanessa nodded. I know that now, and I'm sorry I participated in it. She hesitated, then added, But Barbara, you should know. Derek's under enormous pressure with this company. The Westridge investment is make or break, If anything derails it now. The warmth I'd begun to feel toward Vanessa cooled. Her moment of vulnerability had transformed seamlessly back into manipulation. I wondered if anything she'd said was genuine, or if it was all calculated to lower my defenses. "I understand the importance of the Westridge deal," I replied. "And I have no intention of undermining Derek's business. I simply want what's rightfully mine, both in terms of investment recognition and personal autonomy." Derek returned to the table, slipping his phone into his pocket. "That was Jason. We need to finalize some details for the Westridge paperwork." He looked at me intently. "Mom, can we come to an understanding? I'll have the documents drafted today, outlining your investment and returning control of your accounts. In exchange, you agree not to do anything that might jeopardize the Westridge deal during this critical period." I nodded. "That sounds reasonable, as long as the documents are fair and reviewed by my advisors." Derek seemed relieved. "They will be, I promise." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, the first genuine gesture of affection I'd felt from him in months. "I never meant to make you feel controlled or diminished. I just wanted to protect you." For a moment, I glimpsed the son I remembered. The boy who'd once defended me fiercely on the playground when another child had made fun of my outdated clothes. I wanted to believe his contrition was genuine. "I know," I said softly. "But, Derek, I don't need protection. I need respect." As we parted ways outside the cafe, I felt cautiously optimistic. Perhaps this confrontation would lead to healing rather than further division. Perhaps Derek had genuinely heard me. That optimism lasted exactly 27 hours. The following morning, I went to First Citizens Bank to check on the new accounts I'd opened. The bank manager, a woman named Patricia who had helped me initially, called me into her office rather than meeting me at the teller desk. Her expression was grave. "Mrs. Wilson, I need to make you aware of something concerning," she said once we were seated. "Yesterday afternoon, someone attempted to access your new accounts." My stomach dropped. "Was it my son?" She nodded. "He presented himself as having financial power of attorney for you. He requested that your new accounts be linked to your existing ones for consolidated management." "I never gave him power of attorney," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Did you give him access?" "Absolutely not," Patricia assured me. "He couldn't produce any documentation to support his claim, and your accounts are set up explicitly without secondary access. But Mrs. Wilson, the fact that he tried is concerning." I sat back in my chair, a wave of disappointment washing over. Me? Derek had looked me in the eye, promised to restore my financial independence, and then immediately tried to circumvent that promise by claiming power of attorney he didn't possess. "Thank you for protecting my accounts," I said. "Could you note in my file that under no circumstances should anyone but me be granted access?" Patricia nodded, making a note in her computer. "Already done. And Mrs. Wilson, may I suggest something? Given these circumstances, you might want to consider a more comprehensive protection plan." She outlined additional security measures, a password-protected commentary in my account notes, verbal security questions that would be required for any account changes, and a direct contact protocol where the bank would call me personally to verify any access requests. As Patricia set up these additional protections, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from Derek's company attorney, containing the draft documents we'd discussed. I forwarded them immediately to Martin and my lawyer without reading them. I didn't trust myself to evaluate them objectively, especially now. By the time I left the bank, another email had arrived, this one from Martin, with a subject line that made my blood run cold. "Urgent, do not sign the documents." I called him immediately. "What's wrong?" "Everything," Martin replied grimly. "Those documents don't formalize your investment. They extinguish it. They're structured as a gift acknowledgement, stating that you provided funds to Derek as a family gift with no expectation of return or equity, And the account access provisions? They give you limited view-only access while maintaining Derek as the primary account holder with full transaction rights. I pulled my car over to the side of the road, suddenly feeling unable to drive. That's the opposite of what we agreed to. Exactly, Martin said. Barbara, this isn't a negotiation mistake or a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate attempt to legally cement his control while appearing to address your concerns. The betrayal cut deep. Yesterday at the cafe, I'd glimpsed the sun I remembered, the one I'd believed still existed beneath the controlling behavior. Now I realized it had been a performance, telling me what I wanted to hear while planning to undermine me all along. What do? I asked, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. Meet me at Carol's in 30 minutes, Martin said. And Barbara, don't respond to Derek's email. Don't let him know you're aware of what he's trying to do. We need to develop a counter-strategy. An hour later, I sat at Carol's kitchen table with Martin and my attorney, Elaine Mercer. The draft documents from Derek were spread out before us, sections highlighted in alarming yellow. This clause here, Elaine pointed, would effectively release Derek from any claim you might make on your investment. And this section creates a family financial support arrangement that gives him continued authority over your accounts for health and safety reasons. Can he do this legally? Carol asked, peering over reading glasses at the papers. Not if Barbara doesn't sign, Elaine replied, but it shows his intent quite clearly. I stared at the documents, feeling a strange combination of hurt and clarity. The hurt was obvious. My own son had tried to trick me into signing away both my investment and my financial autonomy. But the clarity was unexpected. For months, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if perhaps Derek really did have my best interests at heart. These documents eliminated any doubt. I need to protect myself, I said firmly. Not just my accounts, but my home, my future. Elaine nodded. I recommend we take several steps immediately. First, a formal legal demand for proper investment documentation. Second, revocation of any previous permissions you may have granted Derek regarding your finances. Third, a cease and desist letter regarding any claims of power of attorney. What about my investment in Future Fund? I asked. Can I get it back? Martin and Elaine exchanged glances. It's complicated, Martin admitted. Without proper documentation from the beginning, we're in somewhat murky territory. The company has clearly been using your funds, but proving exactly how they were allocated would require financial discovery, possibly even litigation. The word litigation hung heavy in the air. Suing my own son, it sounded like a nightmare. But then again, so did allowing him to erase my contribution to his success. We should start by sending a formal letter demanding proper equity documentation, Elaine suggested. That puts the ball in their court. If they refuse, then we consider stronger measures. I agreed to this approach, and Elaine began drafting the necessary documents while Martin made calls to ensure all my financial accounts were secure. Carol made a fresh pot of coffee and sat beside me, her presence a steady comfort. I keep thinking about Robert, I said quietly to Carol while the others worked. What would he think of all this? Carol had known Robert nearly as long as I had. Our families had been friends for decades. He'd be heartbroken, she said honestly. But Barbara, he'd also be incredibly proud of you for standing up for yourself. Would he? I wondered. Or would he think I'm tearing the family apart? Robert valued fairness above almost everything else, Carol reminded me. He wouldn't have stood for what Derek is doing, not for a second. I nodded, taking comfort in her words. Robert had indeed been a man of principle. When his own brother had tried to claim more than his share of their parents' estate, Robert had stood firm, insisting on an equal division despite the resulting family tension. He wouldn't have expected less from me. While we were finishing our planning session, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. Barbara, What's going on? She demanded without preamble. Derek just got a call from the bank saying you've locked down your accounts with special security protocols. I was surprised the bank had contacted Derek. That seemed to contradict the protections I'd just put in place. The bank called Derek? Why would they do that? There was a pause. Well, not exactly. The bank called your house phone to confirm the changes, and Derek happened to answer because he was dropping off some groceries for you. My house phone. I rarely used it anymore, but it was still listed as my contact number on many accounts. I made a mental note to change that immediately. Yes, I've added security to my accounts, I confirmed. After what happened at the cafe yesterday, I thought it was important to ensure my financial privacy. What are you talking about? Vanessa asked, her voice sharp. Derek spent 2 hours with the company attorney yesterday drafting documents that give you everything you asked for. This is how you respond? By treating him like some kind of criminal? I chose my words carefully. Vanessa, I've seen those documents. They don't give me what we discussed. They do the opposite. That's ridiculous, she scoffed. I was there when he reviewed them with the attorney. They restore your account access and formalize your investment. Either Vanessa was lying or she had been shown different documents than the ones sent to me. Given her reaction, I suspected the latter. Derek was manipulating us both. I have the documents right in front of me, I said. They characterize my investment as a gift and maintain Derek's control over my accounts. That's not what we agreed to. There was a long silence. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had lost some of its certainty. That doesn't make sense. Why would Derek say one thing and do another? That's an excellent question, I replied. One I've been asking myself for months now. After another pause, Vanessa said, I need to see these documents myself. I'll forward them to you, I offered, if you promise to look at them objectively. Fine, she agreed. Send them. After ending the call, I forwarded the documents to Vanessa with the key sections highlighted, just as Elaine had done for me. Then I turned back to my advisors. What happens if Derek tries to claim I'm not competent to manage my own affairs? Could he get a conservatorship or something similar? Elaine shook her head firmly. That would be extremely difficult without evidence of cognitive impairment. You're clearly lucid and capable. You have independent financial and legal advice. You're making rational decisions to protect your assets. No court would grant a conservatorship under these circumstances. Her reassurance helped, but I still felt vulnerable. Derek had proven he was willing to go to considerable lengths to maintain control. Who knew what he might try next? As if, reading my thoughts, Carol squeezed my hand. He can't hurt you anymore, Barbara. Not if you don't let him. We finalized our strategy. Formal legal letters would be sent to Derek and Future Fund Solutions the next morning. All my financial accounts would receive updated contact information and enhanced security. And I would meet with a home security company to change my locks and install a basic alarm system. Not because I truly believed Derek would break in, but because I needed to feel completely secure in my own space again. That evening, as I sat alone in my living room with a cup of tea, I found myself looking at old photographs. Derek as a toddler, laughing on Robert's shoulders. Derek at his high school graduation, arm around my waist, beaming with pride. Derek, helping Robert build the backyard deck, both of them covered in sawdust but smiling. Where had that Derek gone? When had he transformed from my loving son into someone who would try to trick his own mother into financial servitude? Had the potential for this betrayal always been there, hidden beneath the surface? Or had success and ambition warped him somehow? I couldn't answer these questions, but I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't allow this treatment to continue, no matter how painful the confrontation might be. I had spent 2 years doubting myself, questioning my own judgment, allowing my confidence to be systematically eroded. That ended now. My phone chimed with a text message from Vanessa. We need to talk. Not with Derek. Just you and me. Tomorrow. Morning? I texted back a simple, yes, curious about what she had to say after reviewing the documents. Had she seen through Derek's manipulation, or was this another strategy to bring me back under control? As I prepared for bed that night, I felt a strange combination of dread and determination. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, possibly even more betrayal. But it would also bring another step toward reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my financial independence. I fell asleep thinking of Robert, wishing he were here to help navigate this unexpected battle with our son. But perhaps his absence was what had allowed the situation to develop in the first place. Derek would never have tried this if his father had been alive. Robert would have seen through the manipulation immediately. Now that role, the role of seeing clearly, of standing firm against manipulation, fell to me alone. And despite the pain, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, I was finally ready to embrace it. The morning dawned with a heavy mist hanging over Portland, blurring the edges of the world outside my window. I'd slept fitfully, waking several times from dreams where I was searching for something important that remained just out of reach. By 6, I gave up on sleep entirely and made myself a strong cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life through a veil of fog. Vanessa had suggested meeting at Pacific Coffee Shop at 9. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table that offered some privacy while still being visible from the entrance. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, young professionals grabbing caffeine before work, retirees lingering over newspapers, college students hunched over laptops, normal life continuing all around me while mine felt suspended in crisis. I ordered a simple tea and waited, rehearsing what I might say to Vanessa. Had she actually seen through Derek's deception, or was this meeting another attempt to manipulate me back into compliance? I'd brought copies of the documents with me, highlighted sections ready to be referenced if needed. At precisely 9, Vanessa walked through the door. She looked different somehow, less polished than usual. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. Instead of her typical tailored business attire, she was dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. It was the most casual I'd seen her since the early days of her relationship with Derek. "Thank you for meeting." "Me?" she said, sliding into the seat across from me. She ordered a black coffee from the passing server, then turned her attention back to me. "I read the documents you sent." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "They're not what Derek described to me," she admitted, a frown creasing her forehead. "Not even close." "No," I agreed. "They're not. I don't understand why he would." She trailed off, staring into the middle distance. "Actually, that's not true. I do understand. I just didn't want to see it." The server delivered her coffee. Vanessa wrapped her hands around the mug, as if seeking warmth, though the spring morning wasn't particularly cold. "How much do you know about my background, Barbara?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Not much," I admitted. "Derek mentioned you grew up in Seattle, that your father works in local government. Your mother is a professor." Vanessa gave a small, bitter laugh. "That's the polished version. The reality is messier. My father is indeed in local government. He's a mid-level administrator who's spent 30 years telling anyone who will listen that he should be running the whole department. My mother teaches as an adjunct at a community college, not the prestigious university position Derek implies." I sipped my tea, unsure where this conversation was heading, but willing to listen. "We weren't poor, but we weren't affluent either," Vanessa continued. "Middle class, struggling sometimes, especially after my father's gambling problems surfaced when I was in high school." This was entirely new information. Derek had always described Vanessa's family as well-established, successful, people who had initially found him lacking. My mother covered for him, worked extra jobs, hid the extent of his addiction from everyone. She managed all the money, paid all the bills, kept us afloat. Vanessa's voice had taken on a distant quality, as if she were narrating someone else's life. When I was 17, he emptied their retirement accounts, $40,000 gone in a weekend. My mother finally filed for divorce. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "I had no idea." Vanessa nodded. "No one does. It's not the story Derek tells about my family. It's not the story I tell either." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Do you know why I was attracted to Derek initially?" "His ambition," I guessed. "His intelligence?" "His stability," she corrected. When we met, Derek was working at Financial Frontiers, a good, steady job with benefits and a clear career path. He was reliable, methodical, cautious with money. The opposite of my father. She paused. Or so I thought. I leaned forward, curious about where this revelation was leading. What changed? About 6 months into our relationship, Derek started talking about leaving his job, starting his own company. He became obsessed with the idea of future fund, staying up late making business plans, networking with potential investors, reading every book on startups he could find. A hint of the old Vanessa resurfaced as she added, "It was exciting, honestly. I got caught up in the vision, too." She took a long sip of her coffee before continuing. "But launching a startup requires capital, and Derek didn't have much saved. That's when he first mentioned approaching you." "He told me it was his original idea," I said, "that he'd been developing the concept for years." Vanessa shook her head. "He got the idea from a conference he attended 3 months before he approached you. The business plan was largely adapted from materials he'd accessed at Financial Frontiers." The cafe had grown quieter as the morning rush subsided. A group at a nearby table gathered their belongings and left, leaving us in a relatively secluded corner. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "What changed?" Vanessa set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. "Yesterday, after our meeting, Derek was different. Cold, calculating. He told me he'd handle you, that he'd found a way to legally secure your investment while maintaining control of your finances." She looked away, her expression troubled. "It reminded me of my father, the way he'd manipulate my mother. The same calculating look, the same certainty that he could outwit her." "And when you saw the actual documents?" I prompted. "It confirmed everything," she said simply. "Derek lied to my face about what those papers contained. He lied to you. And I realized this pattern, of control, of manipulation. It's exactly what destroyed my parents' marriage." I absorbed this revelation, trying to reconcile it with the son I thought I knew. "Has Derek always been this way with you?" Vanessa hesitated. "Not always, not at first. But there have been incidents. Small things that seemed insignificant at the time but form a pattern in retrospect." "Such as?" "He insisted we use a joint checking account after we married, but he monitors every purchase I make. He questions my spending on work clothes, on lunches with colleagues. He has to approve any purchase over $100. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Sound familiar?" It did, painfully so. The same controlling behaviors Derek had gradually imposed on me, he had also imposed on his wife. "There's more," Vanessa said, her voice dropping. 2 months ago, I received a small inheritance when my grandmother passed away, about $30,000. Derek immediately insisted it be invested in Future Fund. When I suggested keeping some aside in my own account, he became angry. Said I didn't trust him, wasn't supporting his vision. "Did you invest it?" I asked. "Most of it," she admitted. "But I secretly kept $5,000 in a separate account. It's the only money I have that he doesn't control." She looked up, her expression a mixture of shame and defiance. "I've been adding to it when I can. Small amounts from my paycheck that I withdraw as cash. Rebates from purchases, that sort of thing. It's my escape fund. Escape fund? I repeated, startled by the term. Vanessa nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. Just in case, because sometimes Derek reminds me too much of my father, and I promised myself I'd never be trapped like my mother was. The revelation hung between us in the quiet cafe. Vanessa, who had always presented herself as the poised, confident partner in Derek's success story, was quietly planning an escape route from my son. The thought sent a chill through me. Vanessa, I said carefully, is there something more I should know? Has Derek ever— No, she interrupted quickly. Nothing like that. He's never been physical. It's just control. Financial control, emotional control, making me doubt myself, making me feel like I can't function without his guidance. She looked up. Like what he's been doing to you. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold despite the coffee she'd been clutching. Why are you telling me all this now? Because I need to make a decision, she said. And I need to know if you're really going to stand your ground this time. What do you mean? Derek is panicking, she explained. The documents you refused to sign, he needed those to secure the Withdrew investment. They've asked for confirmation that there are no outstanding financial disputes or undocumented obligations that could affect the company's valuation. This was new information. So, without my signature, the investment is at risk. Yes, Derek spent half the night on the phone with Jason and the company attorney, trying to find a workaround. They've given him until tomorrow to resolve the situation. I felt a momentary twinge of concern for Derek's business, reflexive maternal worry about his success. But then I remembered the documents he'd tried to trick me into signing, the calculated betrayal. I won't sign anything that erases my investment or maintains his control over my finances, I said firmly. Not even to save his deal. Vanessa nodded slowly. I thought you might say that, and I respect it. She took a deep breath. Barbara, I need to ask you something important. If I supported you in this stand against Derek, would you help me secure my own financial independence too? The question surprised me. Of course I would. But Vanessa, what exactly are you suggesting? I have information, she said, lowering her voice further. Documentation about how Future Fund was actually founded, how your investment was used, even copies of the original business plan that Derek took from Financial Frontiers, information that would be valuable to your lawyer. I stared at her, processing the implications. You're talking about testifying against your husband. I'm talking about standing up for what's right, she corrected, and maybe saving my marriage in the process, because if Derek continues down this path— She shook her head. I won't stay. I can't. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. Finally, I asked, What do you want in return? Your promise that you'll help me establish financial independence from Derek, whether I stay with him or not. And, if things go badly, a place to stay temporarily while I get on my feet. It was a substantial request, but not an unreasonable one. And the information Vanessa had could potentially transform my negotiating position with Derek. I'll help you, I promised. But Vanessa, are you certain about this? Once we go down this road? I've been thinking about it all night, she said. And yes, I'm certain. Derek needs a wake-up call. This might be his last chance to become the man I thought I married, the man you raised him to be. We spent the next hour outlining a plan. Vanessa would collect the relevant documents and bring them to my attorney that afternoon. Meanwhile, I would schedule a meeting with Derek for the following day, after his deadline with Withdrew had passed. If he wanted to salvage the investment, he would need to negotiate honestly with me. As we were preparing to leave, Vanessa paused. There's one more thing you should know. The house you're living in. Derek has been talking to a real estate agent about listing it. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Without my knowledge? He said he has joint power of attorney with you, left by Robert. That it gives him the right to make property decisions if he believes you're not managing your assets properly. The knot in my stomach tightened. Robert had indeed established a power of attorney arrangement, but it was never intended to be used this way. It was meant for emergencies, for situations where I was truly unable to make decisions for myself. When was he planning to tell me about this? I asked, my voice tight. After the Westridge deal closed, he said the house is too much for you to maintain, that downsizing would be in your best interest. Vanessa looked troubled. I believed him, Barbara. I really thought he was trying to help you. And now? Now I see it for what it is. Another attempt to control your life and your assets. She stood up, gathering her purse. I'll get those documents to your lawyer today. And Barbara, be careful. Derek is not taking this challenge to his authority well. After Vanessa left, I remained at the cafe, my mind racing. The revelation about the house felt like a final betrayal. The home where we'd lived as a family, where Robert and I had built our life together, where Derek had grown up. The thought of him secretly planning to sell it, to uproot me from my own home without my consent, ignited a fire within me that burned away any remaining hesitation. I called Elaine immediately. We need to nullify any power of attorney Derek might try to exercise, I said without preamble. I've already drafted those documents, she assured me. But Barbara, this new information about the house changes things. We need to move more quickly than I anticipated. By noon, I was in Elaine's office, signing papers to revoke all powers of attorney, filing formal notices with the county property office to prevent any unauthorized transactions involving my home, and preparing for the confrontation with Derek that now seemed inevitable. Vanessa's evidence could be crucial, Elaine explained as we reviewed the documents. If she can prove Derek misrepresented your investment or misappropriated funds, we have a much stronger position. What about her? I asked. Is she legally vulnerable in any of this? As long as she wasn't a party to the misrepresentation, no. And even if she was peripherally involved, her cooperation now would likely protect her from any consequences. I nodded, relieved on Vanessa's behalf. Despite our complicated relationship, I didn't want to see her harmed by the fallout from Derek's actions. She was, in her own way, another victim of his controlling behavior. As I was leaving Elaine's office, my phone rang. It was Derek. Mom, he began, his voice tense. We need to talk. The bank says you've revoked all my access to your accounts. The investment documents I sent are still unsigned. And now I'm hearing you've filed something with the county property office? What's going on? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm protecting my assets from unauthorized access, Derek, including any attempt to sell my home without my consent. There was a long pause. Who told you about that? Does it matter? The point is, you were planning to sell my home, the home your father and I purchased, where we raised you, without my knowledge or permission. It was going to be a discussion, Mom, he protested, though his voice lacked conviction. The house is too big for you. The maintenance costs are eating into your retirement funds, and property values in the area are at an all-time high. It's the perfect time to sell. That should have been my decision to make, I said firmly. Not yours. I have joint power of attorney, he argued. Dad wanted me to help manage your affairs if necessary. For emergencies, Derek, not as a license to control my life. I paused, then added, and as of this morning, that power of attorney has been formally revoked. The silence that followed was so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice cold and unfamiliar. You have no idea what you're doing, Mom. The Westridge deal is hanging by a thread. If you'd just signed those papers, everything would have been fine. We would have figured out the rest. Those papers were a betrayal, Derek. They would have erased my investment and cemented your control over my finances permanently. I kept my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I was trying to structure things in a way that protected everyone's interests, he insisted. The company needs clean paperwork for the Westridge deal. Your investment needed to be properly documented. We just disagreed on the form that documentation should take. His attempt to reframe his deception as a mere difference of opinion was so brazen it almost took my breath away. No, Derek, we didn't disagree. You lied to me. You told me one thing and sent me papers that did the opposite. That's not— Stop, I interrupted. Just stop. I don't want to hear any more excuses or justifications. What I want is honesty and respect. If you're ready to provide those, we can meet tomorrow to discuss a fair resolution. If not, then our attorneys can handle it from here. The line went quiet again. When Derek finally spoke, his voice had changed. No longer defensive or confrontational, but flat, almost defeated. Fine, tomorrow. Your house, 10 o'clock. After he hung up, I sat in my car in the law office parking lot, hands shaking slightly, on the steering wheel. The conversation had been brief but intense, leaving me emotionally drained. Still, beneath the exhaustion, I felt something else, a growing sense of strength, of reclaiming my own power. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through Forest Park, allowing the towering evergreens and dappled sunlight to soothe my jangled nerves. By the time I reached my neighborhood, I felt calmer, more centered, ready for whatever might come. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street, Jason Martinez's silver Audi. He was sitting behind the wheel, apparently waiting. When he saw me arrive, he got out and approached with a hesitant smile. "Mrs. Wilson," he called, "do you have a moment to talk?" I regarded him cautiously. Jason was Derek's business partner, his co-founder at Future Fund. His presence at my home, after everything that had happened, seemed unlikely to be a coincidence. "Did Derek send you?" I asked. Jason shook his head. "No, he doesn't know I'm here. Can we talk inside? It's important." Against my better judgment, I invited him in. Jason had always struck me as the more grounded half of the Future Fund leadership, less flashy than Derek, more focused on substance than appearance. Once we were seated in my living room, Jason got straight to the point. "Mrs. Wilson, I know about the situation with your investment, and I'm concerned about how it's being handled." "You mean you're concerned about the Westridge deal falling through?" I corrected. "That too," he admitted. "But honestly, I'm more concerned about the company's integrity. When Derek and I founded Future Fund, we had a clear vision to create a financial platform that actually helped people, that operated with transparency and fairness." I nodded, remembering those early conversations, the genuine idealism that had initially drawn me to support Derek's venture. "Your seed investment made everything possible," Jason continued. "Without it, we wouldn't have survived the first 6 months. Derek knows that. I know that. And you deserve proper recognition and documentation." His frank acknowledgement of my contribution caught me off guard. It was the first time since this ordeal began that anyone from Future Fund had straightforwardly recognized the importance of my investment. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "But if you believe I deserve proper recognition, why are you only speaking up now?" Jason looked uncomfortable. "Until recently, I thought everything was being handled appropriately. Derek assured me you were a silent investor by choice, that you didn't want formal documentation for tax reasons." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I should have verified that with you directly. That's on me. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. And now? Now I know he wasn't being truthful. Not with you, not with me. Jason leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mrs. Wilson, I want to make this right. I've drafted new investment documentation that fairly represents your contribution. 5% equity, retroactive to the company's founding, with full voting rights on major decisions. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and handed it to me. Unlike the documents Derek had sent, these were straightforward, clearly outlining my investment and the corresponding equity stake, with no hidden clauses or manipulative language. Why would you do this? I asked, suspicious of this sudden ally. You're Derek's partner. Your interests are aligned with his. My interests are aligned with the company's integrity, Jason corrected, and with doing right by the people who made our success possible. He paused. Also, practically speaking, without resolving this issue, the Westridge investment won't go through. And without that funding, Future Fund won't survive another 6 months. So there was self-interest involved after all. Still, Jason's approach, honest, recognition of my contribution combined with a fair proposed solution, stood in stark contrast to Derek's manipulative tactics. I appreciate this, I said, indicating the folder. But I'll need to have my attorney review these documents before I consider signing anything. Of course, Jason agreed readily. That's exactly what you should do. I've included my direct contact information. If your attorney has questions or suggested changes, I'm happy to discuss them. As Jason prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Mrs. Wilson, there's something else you should know. Derek's not just risking the Westridge deal with his handling of this situation. The board is watching closely. If this isn't resolved appropriately, his position as CEO could be in jeopardy. This revelation surprised me. The board could remove him? If they determine his personal actions are endangering the company, yes. The governance documents give them that authority. Jason looked troubled. I don't want it to come to that. Despite our current disagreements, Derek is brilliant, and his vision for Future Fund is something I believe in. But he's lost perspective on this issue, and it's clouding his judgment in dangerous ways. After Jason left, I called Elaine and described the unexpected visit and the documents he'd provided. She promised to review them immediately and give me her assessment. Don't commit to anything yet, she cautioned. But if these documents are as straightforward as they sound, they could offer a path to resolution that avoids protracted conflict. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my garden, finding solace in the simple act of tending to my plants. The spring weather had coaxed my rose bushes into early bloom, their fragrance filling the air as I worked. Robert had loved these roses. He'd helped me plant the original bushes 20 years ago, carefully selecting varieties that would thrive in the Pacific Northwest climate. The thought of Derek secretly planning to sell this home, to uproot me from the garden Robert and I had lovingly created together, reignited my determination. This wasn't just about money or investment recognition. It was about respect, about honoring the life Robert and I had built, about asserting my right to make my own decisions. As evening fell, I received 2 significant calls. The first was from Elaine, confirming that Jason's documents appeared legitimate and fair. They offer exactly what you've been asking for: proper recognition of your investment and a corresponding equity stake. No hidden clauses, no attempts to maintain control over your personal finances. She sounded almost surprised. If you're inclined to accept, I believe this represents a fair resolution to the investment issue. The second call was from Vanessa, her voice hushed as if she were trying not to be overheard. I delivered the documents to your attorney, she said. But Barbara, Derek knows something's happening. He's been on the phone all afternoon, talking to the company attorney, to board members. He's frantically trying to salvage the Westridge deal. Did he mention Jason's visit to me? I asked. No, she sounded surprised. Jason came to see you. I explained briefly about Jason's alternative investment documentation proposal. Vanessa listened intently, then said, "That's significant. If Jason is breaking ranks with Derek on this issue, it means the company's leadership is divided. That strengthens your position considerably." "What about you?" I asked. "Are you okay?" There was a pause. For now. Derek's too preoccupied with the Westridge situation to focus on me. But Barbara, be prepared for tomorrow. He won't give up easily. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, watching darkness settle over the neighborhood. Tomorrow's meeting. With Derek loomed large in my mind, a confrontation I both dreaded and knew was necessary. Would he come prepared to negotiate honestly? Or would he arrive with new tactics, new attempts to manipulate and control? Either way, I was ready. With Jason's documents, Vanessa's evidence, and my own newfound resolve, I finally held cards of my own to play. After months of feeling powerless, of doubting my own judgment, of allowing Derek to gradually take control of my life, I had reclaimed my position of strength. Tomorrow would be difficult, perhaps the most difficult conversation I'd ever have with my son. But as I prepared for bed that night, I felt a surprising sense of peace. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, with clarity about what I deserved and the courage to stand my ground. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I fell asleep without anxiety gnawing at me, without the weight of financial dependency pressing down. Instead, I felt something I had almost forgotten, the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her own mind and is prepared to act accordingly. I woke before dawn, the first pale light of morning barely visible through my bedroom curtains. Sleep had come surprisingly easily, but now, with the confrontation just hours away, my mind was fully alert, rehearsing possible scenarios, preparing responses to whatever tactics Derek might employ. By 7, I was showered and dressed in what Carol had once called my principal outfit, a navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, tailored slacks, and low heels. It was the outfit I'd worn to difficult parent conferences, to school board meetings, where resources were being debated, to disciplinary hearings where I needed to project both authority and fairness. Today, I needed that same balance. I made a simple breakfast but found I had little appetite. Instead, I carried my coffee to the sunroom at the back of the house, settling into the wicker chair that had been Robert's favorite spot. From here, I could see the entire garden, the rose bushes along the fence, the small vegetable patch we'd tended together, the Japanese maple he'd planted for our 25th anniversary. Each element held memories, connections to the life we'd built. "I wish you were here for this," I said aloud, imagining Robert's steady presence beside me. He had always been the more direct one in confrontations, unafraid to name unacceptable behavior, to draw clear boundaries. I had been the mediator, the one seeking compromise, sometimes at my own expense. But Robert wasn't here. This confrontation fell to me alone. At precisely 9:58, a car pulled into my driveway. Derek, punctual as always. I watched through the window as he sat for a moment, checking his appearance in the rearview mirror, straightening his tie. Always conscious of presentation, my son. Always aware of the impression he was making. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. I took a steadying breath and went to answer it. Derek stood on the porch, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of success and authority. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see tension in the set of his shoulders, in the tightness around his eyes. "Mom," he greeted me, his tone businesslike. "Derek," I replied, stepping aside to let him enter. "We'll talk in the living room." He followed me silently, his footsteps familiar on the hardwood floors he'd once run across as a child. In the living room, I'd arranged 2 chairs facing each other, with a small table between them holding a pitcher of water and 2 glasses. No snacks, no coffee, No pretense of a social visit. This was a negotiation. Derek took in the arrangement, with a quick glance, his mouth tightening slightly. He'd expected to be welcomed into the kitchen, perhaps, where our difficult conversations had always taken place in the past, softened by food and familiar surroundings. The formality of this setup was my first signal that things had changed. "Before we start," I said as we sat down, "I want to be clear about something. This conversation will either end with a fair resolution that respects my autonomy and properly recognizes my investment, or it will end with our attorneys handling all future communication. There's no middle ground here, Derek." He blinked, momentarily taken aback by my directness. Then he nodded, his expression shifting to what I recognized as his negotiation face, attentive but noncommittal. "I understand yesterday was difficult," he began. "The documents my attorney drafted didn't properly reflect our conversation. That was an oversight, and I apologize." An oversight, not a deliberate attempt to trick me in his framing. Just an unfortunate miscommunication. "It wasn't an oversight," I said calmly. "The documents directly contradicted what you told me they would contain. They were designed to extinguish my investment claim while maintaining your control over my finances. That's not an oversight, Derek. It's deception." He shifted in his chair, discomfort briefly crossing his features before he regained composure. "I understand how it might seem that way." "It doesn't seem that way," I interrupted. "It is that way. Let's not waste time on semantics." I poured myself a glass of water, took a sip, then continued. "Jason came to see me yesterday." Derek's surprise was genuine. "Jason? Why would he?" "He brought alternative investment documentation that fairly represents my contribution to future fund. 5% equity, retroactive to founding, with voting rights on major decisions." Derek's face darkened. "He had no authority to do that. Those documents aren't approved by the board or the company attorney. Actually, as co-founder and chief operating officer, he does have authority to propose equitable solutions. And according to my attorney, the documents are entirely legitimate." I held Derek's gaze steadily. "They represent exactly what I've been asking for all along. Proper recognition of my investment without any attempt to control my personal finances." Derek was silent for a moment, clearly recalculating his approach. When he spoke again, his voice had softened, taking on the concerned tone I'd grown so weary of hearing. "Mom, you need to understand something about equity stakes. They come with responsibilities, tax implications, potential liability. I was trying to structure things in a way that protected you from those complications." "By erasing my contribution completely?" I asked. "By characterizing a $350,000 investment as a family gift with no expectation of return?" He sighed, spreading his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. "The value would have come back to you in other ways, through family support, through secured retirement planning. It was never about taking your money." "No," I agreed. "It was about control. Control of my investment, control of my finances, control of my home, control of my life." Derek flinched slightly at the word home. So he knew I was aware of his plans to sell it. "The house is too large for a single person," he said, shifting topics abruptly. "The maintenance costs alone are eating into your retirement savings. Downsizing would be the financially prudent move." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But that's my decision to make, not yours. And attempting to exercise power of attorney to sell my home without my consent crosses a line that can't be uncrossed, Derek." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I was going to discuss it with you. After you'd already listed it, after you'd already spoken with realtors." "That's not a discussion, Derek. That's a fait accompli with the pretense of consultation." Silence fell between us. Through the window, I could see the Japanese maple swaying gently in the spring breeze, its delicate red leaves catching the morning light. Robert had loved that tree. "The Westridge deal is in jeopardy," Derek said finally, his voice tighter now. "Without clean investment documentation, they're hesitant to proceed. The deadline is noon today." "I'm aware," I replied. Jason mentioned the timeline. Derek's jaw clenched briefly. Jason seems to have mentioned quite a lot. "He mentioned the truth, Derek, something I've had difficulty getting from you lately." I leaned forward slightly. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm prepared to sign the investment documentation Jason provided, which will give Westridge the clean paperwork they need. In exchange, you will immediately restore my complete financial independence. All accounts returned to my sole control. All monitoring stopped. All credit cards returned to my name only." Derek stared at me, calculating. "And if I agree to these terms?" "Then the investment issue is resolved, the Westridge deal proceeds, and we can begin the longer process of repairing our relationship if that's even possible at this point." "And if I don't agree?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "Then I formally dispute the company's right to use my investment funds, which would certainly kill the Westridge deal. My attorney files for financial elder abuse, which would trigger regulatory scrutiny of both you personally and Future Fund, and any relationship between us is effectively over." The stark terms hung in the air between us. Derek's expression hardened. A flash of the cold calculation I'd glimpsed previously sliding across his features. "You wouldn't do that," he said, his voice low. "You wouldn't destroy everything I've built out of spite." "Not out of spite, Derek. Out of self-respect." I kept my voice steady. "And yes, I absolutely would, because what you've built was founded on my investment, which you've attempted to erase. It was built while you systematically controlled and diminished me. At some point, the success isn't worth the cost." Derek stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, his movements tense, controlled. "This isn't you talking," he said finally. "This is that lawyer, or Carol, or someone else putting ideas in your head." The dismissal was so predictable I almost smiled. When reason failed, question competence. When facts were inconvenient, suggest outside influence. I'm 60 years old, Derek. I managed a department budget of over $2 million for 15 years. I raised you alone after your father died. I'm perfectly capable of recognizing when I'm being manipulated and deciding to stop allowing it. He turned to face me, his expression a complex mixture of anger, calculation, and something that might have been grudging respect. "I need to make a call," he said abruptly. I nodded toward the sunroom. "You can use that space for privacy." As Derek disappeared into the sunroom, phone already at his ear, I remained seated, maintaining my composure despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The confrontation was unfolding largely as I'd anticipated. Initial dismissal, attempts to reframe the situation, and now, presumably, consultation with advisors on how to proceed. Through the partially open door, I could hear fragments of Derek's conversation, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "No, she won't budge. Jason already offered." "Yes, the full 5%. No, that's not an option anymore. The deadline is noon. We don't have time for." After several minutes, he returned, his expression resigned but not defeated. A businessman who recognized a losing position but was already calculating how to minimize losses and find advantage elsewhere. "I'll agree to your terms," he said, sitting down again. 5% equity as documented in Jason's papers. Full restoration of your financial independence. But I want something in exchange beyond just resolving the investment issue." "What is that?" I asked cautiously. "Your public support for Future Fund, attendance at key investor events, testimonials about the company's vision and potential. Essentially, I need you to present a united family front to Westridge and other potential investors." It was a calculated request. Derek knew the value of the narrative. the devoted mother who believed so completely in her son's vision that she invested her own savings to help launch his company. It was a compelling story, one that would resonate with investors, create confidence, suggest family stability and support. "I'll agree to limited public appearances," I said after consideration. "Quarterly investor events only, with advance notice. No testimonials that reference my personal investment amount. And my support is contingent on Future Fund actually fulfilling its stated mission of helping middle-class families achieve financial security." Derek nodded, relief visible in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. "Acceptable. I'll have Jason bring the final documents for signature this afternoon." "Have him bring them to Elaine's office," I specified. "I'll sign there with my attorney present." A flash of irritation crossed Derek's face at this continued insistence on legal oversight, but he nodded. "Fine. And the financial accounts?" "I'll meet you at First Citizens Bank at 3 o'clock to complete the necessary paperwork. I expect all accounts to be returned to my sole control by the end of business today." "That's not a reasonable timeline," Derek protested. "Some of these processes take days to—" "Your banking contact can expedite everything," I interrupted. "I've already confirmed this with Patricia. All it requires is your signature on the appropriate forms." Derek's expression shifted subtly, surprised that I'd done this preparation, perhaps a realization that I was more formidable than he'd calculated. "3 o'clock then," he agreed. An awkward silence fell between us. The business portion of our meeting had concluded, but the emotional aftermath hung heavy in the air. This was my son sitting across from me, the child I'd raised, the young man I'd supported through college, the entrepreneur whose vision I'd believed in enough to invest a significant portion of my savings. And yet, he had been willing to betray me, to manipulate me, to gradually strip away my autonomy in service of his own control. "Derek," I said finally, "I need you to understand something. What you've done, attempting to control my finances, monitoring my spending, questioning every purchase, planning to sell my home without consent, it's not just inappropriate, it's abusive." He flinched visibly at the word. "Mom, that's not—" "It is," I insisted. "It's called financial elder abuse, and it's not something I ever expected to experience at the hands of my own son." Derek looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I was trying to help," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, you weren't," I replied gently. "You were trying to control. There's a difference. Help respects autonomy. Help acknowledges competence. Help offers options rather than imposing decisions." He remained silent, staring at the floor. "I don't know if our relationship can recover from this," I continued. "That will depend largely on whether you can genuinely recognize what you've done and commit to changing the pattern. But one thing is certain. I will never again allow you to control my finances or make decisions about my life without my full and informed consent." Derek nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. "I understand." "Do you?" I asked. "Because understanding requires acknowledgement, Derek. It requires you to say, out loud, what you've done." He looked up then, his expression a complex mixture of emotions, anger, shame, calculation, and beneath it all, a flicker of the son I remembered, the boy who had once had a strong moral compass before ambition and control had gradually eroded it. "I controlled your finances inappropriately," he said finally, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "I monitored your spending without legitimate cause. I planned to sell your home using power of attorney in a way that wasn't what Dad intended when he set it up." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was more than I had expected. A start, perhaps, if there was to be any start at all. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It matters that you can name it, even partially." Derek glanced at his watch. "I need to get back to the office. Jason and I have to prepare for the Westridge call at noon." I nodded, rising. I'll see you at the bank at 3. As I walked him to the door, Derek paused, turning to face me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "Yes?" I prompted. "Do you think—" He hesitated, then continued. "Do you think Vanessa feels the same way? That I've been controlling her finances too?" The question took me by surprise. It suggested an awareness, a moment of self-reflection, that I hadn't anticipated. "That's something you need to ask her, Derek. But I would suggest that before you do, you think carefully about how you've structured your financial relationship with your wife, and whether it reflects a partnership of equals." He nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I'll think about that." After Derek left, I felt a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The confrontation had been difficult but productive. I had stood my ground, maintained my composure, and achieved the primary objectives: recognition of my investment and restoration of my financial independence. But the emotional toll was significant, leaving me drained and slightly shaky now that the adrenaline was subsiding. I called Carol, who had been waiting to hear how the meeting went. "He agreed to all the terms," I told her. "Jason is bringing the investment documents to Elaine's office this afternoon, and Derek and I are meeting at the bank at 3 to restore my account access." "Barbara, that's wonderful," Carol exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground." "It was harder than I expected," I admitted. "Not the negotiation part. That went almost exactly as we anticipated. But seeing him calculating, watching him try different tactics to maintain control. It hurt, Carol. This is my son, and he treated me like an adversary to be managed rather than his mother to be respected." "I know," Carol said softly, "and that pain won't disappear overnight. But Barbara, you've done something extraordinary today. You've reclaimed your power, your dignity, your independence. That matters, even with the hurt." After we hung up, I made myself a proper breakfast, suddenly ravenous now that the confrontation was behind me. As I ate, I mentally prepared for the afternoon's tasks: meeting Jason and Elaine to sign the investment documents, then going to the bank with Derek to formalize the return of my financial accounts to my sole control. By noon, I felt steady enough to venture out. I decided to visit the community center where I'd once wanted to take watercolor classes. The classes Vanessa had dismissed as overpriced and unnecessary at my age. Now, with my financial independence being restored, I could make these decisions for myself again. The community center was bustling with activity. Seniors playing cards in one room, a yoga class finishing up in another, children's voices drifting from what appeared to be an after-school program in the gymnasium. I found the arts program, office, and picked up a brochure for the summer session. "The watercolor class is very popular," the young woman at the desk told me. "If you're interested, I'd recommend registering soon. The instructor, Mr. Chen, has quite a following." I smiled, feeling a small spark of anticipation at the prospect of learning something new, of creating something beautiful. "I'd like to register today if that's possible." "Of course," she said brightly, pulling out a form. "The class meets Tuesday evenings, 6:30 to 8:30, for 8 weeks starting in June." As I filled out the registration form, I realized this was my first independent financial decision in nearly 2 years. The first time I was committing to a purchase without calculating Derek's potential objections, without rehearsing justifications for unnecessary spending. The freedom of it, simple as it was, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. When I handed over my credit card to pay the class fee, the young woman processed it without incident. No declined transaction, no monitoring alert to Derek, no subsequent questioning of my choices. Just a simple exchange, my money for a service I valued, the kind of transaction most adults took for granted, but which had become fraught with tension and control in my life. "You're all set, Mrs. Wilson," she said, handing me a receipt and a supply list. "We look forward to seeing you in June." I tucked the materials into my purse, oddly moved by this mundane interaction. It was a first step, small but significant, on the road back to normal financial adulthood. At 1:30, I arrived at Elaine's office. Jason was already there, looking slightly nervous but determined. The final investment documents were spread on the conference table, each signature line marked with a colored tab. "Mrs. Wilson," Jason greeted me, standing as I entered. "Thank you for agreeing to this resolution. It's the right thing for everyone involved." "How did the Westridge call go?" I asked. Jason's face relaxed into a genuine smile. "Very well. Once I explained that we were finalizing proper documentation for your founding investment, they were satisfied. The term sheet is approved, pending your signature on these documents today." Elaine had already reviewed everything, confirming that the final versions matched what Jason had originally presented to me. A clean, straightforward recognition of my 5% equity stake, with no hidden clauses or manipulative language. "Before I sign," I said to Jason, "I want to be clear about something. My investment in Future Fund was always about supporting Derek's vision, a platform that would help ordinary people achieve financial security. I still believe in that mission, and I'll support it publicly as agreed. But I'll be watching to ensure the company actually fulfills that promise rather than just using it as marketing language." Jason nodded soberly. "That's entirely fair. And Mrs. Wilson, for what it's worth, that mission is why I joined Future Fund in the first place. My own parents lost their retirement savings in the 2008 financial crisis. Helping prevent that from happening to other families. It's personal for me, too." This glimpse of Jason's motivation, his personal connection to the company's stated mission, reassured me. Perhaps Future Fund could still become what Derek and I had originally envisioned, a force for good in the financial world, rather than just another startup chasing valuation and exit strategies. I signed the documents, each signature representing not just my legal claim to a portion of the company, but also a reclamation of my agency, my right to be recognized for my contribution. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson," Elaine said as I signed the final page. "You are now officially a founding investor in Future Fund Solutions." Jason shook my hand, his expression sincere. "Thank you for your investment, Mrs. Wilson, both the financial commitment and the faith in our vision. We won't let you down." As Jason gathered his copies of the signed documents, he hesitated. "Mrs. Wilson, about Derek. I know things have been difficult between you, but I've known him for years, worked closely with him through all the ups and downs of building this company. He's under enormous pressure, and sometimes that brings out the worst in people." "That's not an excuse for financial abuse, Jason," I said gently. "No, it's not," he agreed quickly. "What he did was wrong, period. I believe he can be better than this. The Derek I partnered with 3 years ago had integrity, vision, a genuine desire to help people. That person is still in there somewhere." I nodded, appreciating Jason's loyalty to his partner even as he had stood up for what was right. "I hope you're correct, for everyone's sake, including Derek's." After Jason left, Elaine reviewed what would happen at the bank meeting. "You have every right to complete privacy in your financial affairs," she reminded me. "Make sure all online access is removed, all monitoring systems disconnected, all statements redirected solely to you." "I will," I promised. "Patricia at First Citizens has been tremendously helpful in preparing for this." "Good," Elaine said. "And Barbara, remember, this is just the beginning. Establishing financial boundaries with Derek will be an ongoing process, not a one-time event. He may test those boundaries, try to re-establish control in subtle ways. Stay vigilant." Her warning was timely. Derek had agreed to my terms, but that didn't mean he had fundamentally changed. The patterns of control that had developed over Nearly 2 years wouldn't disappear with a single confrontation or a signed agreement. At precisely 3 o'clock, I arrived at First Citizens Bank. Derek was already there, engaged in conversation with Patricia in her office. He looked up as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Mom," he greeted me. "Patricia has prepared all the necessary paperwork." Patricia nodded, indicating a substantial stack of documents on her desk. "Mrs. Wilson, these forms will remove all external access to your accounts, update your contact information, and establish new security protocols as we discussed earlier." "Thank you, Patricia," I said, taking the seat she offered. The next hour was consumed with paperwork, signatures on countless forms, verification of account numbers, establishment of new online banking credentials, cancellation of Derek's access to my credit card statements, removal of his name from my accounts. With each signature, each form completed, I felt another thread of the control web being severed. Derek remained largely silent throughout the process, signing where directed, offering factual responses when Patricia asked technical questions about account configurations. His expression was unreadable, not openly resistant, but not genuinely supportive either. A man complying with terms he had agreed to, nothing more, nothing less. As we completed the final forms, Patricia smiled at me. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson. Your accounts are now restored to your sole control. The changes to your online banking access will take effect immediately. Your new credit cards should arrive within 5 business days. Thank you for your help with all of this," I said sincerely. Patricia nodded, then looked between Derek and me. "Is there anything else you need assistance with today?" "No, that's everything," I replied. As we left the bank, stepping into the late afternoon sunshine, an awkward silence fell between Derek and me. The business was concluded, the agreement signed, the accounts transferred. All that remained was the human element, the damaged relationship between mother and son. "So," Derek said finally, "that's done." "Yes," I agreed. "The paperwork is done, but Derek, rebuilding trust, that's a much longer process." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I know." After a pause, he added, "For what it's worth, I've been thinking about what you said. About Vanessa. About how I've structured our finances. You might have been right about some of it." It was a small acknowledgement, cautiously phrased, but it represented more self-reflection than I had expected. Perhaps Jason was right. Perhaps the Derek I'd raised, the one with integrity and a moral compass, wasn't entirely lost beneath layers of ambition and control. "That's a start," I said. "A good one." We stood for a moment in the parking lot, mother and son, connected by blood and history, but separated by broken trust and painful revelations. The path forward was unclear, filled with potential pitfalls, and the possibility of further hurt. But for the first time in nearly 2 years, I faced that uncertainty from a position of strength and independence rather than vulnerability and dependence. "I should get back to the office," Derek said finally. "The Westridge paperwork needs to be finalized by 5. I nodded. "Go." "And Derek?" "I meant what I said about supporting Future Fund's mission. If the company stays true to that vision, actually helping ordinary people achieve financial security, I'll be its biggest advocate." Something shifted in Derek's expression. Then, a flicker of the idealistic young man who had first described his business concept to me 3 years ago, eyes bright with the possibility of creating something meaningful. "I haven't forgotten why we started this," he said quietly. "Sometimes the means overtake the ends, but the mission, that hasn't changed." As I watched him walk to his car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the immediate battle was won, sadness for the relationship damage, cautious, hope that perhaps with time and boundaries, some healing might be possible. For now, though, I had reclaimed what mattered most: my financial independence, my dignity, my right to make my own choices. I'd withdrawn my investment from my son's control while securing proper recognition for my contribution to his business. I'd established clear boundaries that could not be crossed again without serious consequences. Standing in that parking lot, keys in hand, credit cards newly in my name only, bank accounts under my sole control, I felt something I hadn't experienced in nearly 2 years. The quiet confidence of a woman who had faced a difficult truth, stood her ground, and emerged stronger for it. I was Barbara Wilson again. Not just Derek's mother, not just Robert's widow, not just a source of funding, or an object of control, but a whole person with her own identity, her own authority, her own financial autonomy. As I drove home, I made an impulsive detour to the art supply store listed on my watercolor class supply sheet. I would buy the materials today, prepare for the class that was still weeks away, perhaps even try a few simple exercises on my own, before formal instruction began. Because that's what financial independence meant, in the end. Not just control of accounts and statements and credit cards, but the freedom to make choices, large and small, without justification or permission. The freedom to buy art supplies on a Tuesday afternoon simply because I wanted to learn something new. The freedom to live my life on my own terms, honoring Robert's memory while creating new experiences of my own. And no one, not even my own son, would ever take that freedom from me again. 3 months passed in a blur of quiet transformation. Spring deepened into summer, my garden flourished with new plantings, and my watercolor skills progressed from awkward beginnings to occasional moments of genuine beauty. Mr. Chen, my instructor, had a gift for drawing out each student's unique style rather than imposing technical perfection. The emotion matters more than the execution, he often told us. His soft voice carrying wisdom earned through decades of artistic practice. I'd prepared myself for Derek to test the boundaries we'd established, perhaps making subtle attempts to regain some measure of financial oversight in my life. But to my surprise, he maintained a respectful distance from my finances. Our relationship remained fragile, marked by careful conversation during the 2 investor events I'd attended. As promised, we were cordial, but not close, the kind of surface politeness that masked deeper uncertainties about whether true reconciliation was possible. Vanessa, however, had become an unexpected ally. After our confrontation with Derek, she'd begun her own quiet campaign for financial independence within their marriage. She'd opened separate accounts, insisted on greater transparency in their joint finances, and enrolled in a financial management course at the community college. Derek had resisted initially but ultimately yielded, perhaps recognizing that the alternative might be losing her entirely. "He's trying," she told me during one of our occasional lunch meetings. "Not always succeeding, but trying. The boundaries make him uncomfortable, but he's learning to respect them." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. It's a process for all of us. Breaking established patterns takes time. One warm July afternoon, Carol and I were enjoying iced tea on my back patio when she noticed a stack of real estate listings on the side table. "Barbara," she said, surprise evident in her voice, "are you thinking of moving?" I smiled, gathering the listings into a neater pile. "Just exploring options. Now that I'm fully in control of my finances again, I'm reassessing everything, including whether this house still makes sense for me." Carol's eyebrows rose. "But I thought keeping the house was a major point of contention with Derek. You fought so hard to prevent him from selling it." "I fought for the right to make my own decision," I corrected gently. "Not necessarily for the house itself." I gestured to the expansive garden around us. "This place holds wonderful memories, but it's also more space than I need, with maintenance. Costs that do impact my retirement funds." Derek wasn't wrong about the financial logic. He was just wrong to try making the decision for me. Carol nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her expression. "So you might actually downsize?" "I might," I acknowledged, On my terms, in my time frame, with the proceeds under my control. The distinction matters. The truth was, I had begun to see the house differently in recent months. Where once every corner held precious memories of life with Robert, now some rooms sat mostly unused, gathering dust rather than new experiences. The master bedroom I'd reclaimed after Derek and Vanessa moved out remained sparsely decorated, as if I hadn't fully moved back in. The formal dining room hadn't hosted a proper dinner party since Robert's passing. Perhaps most tellingly, I found myself increasingly drawn to the coastal communities an hour west of Portland. During a weekend drive to clear my head shortly after the confrontation with Derek, I discovered a small arts community in Seaside where retired teachers, healthcare workers, and creative professionals had formed a tight-knit neighborhood of modest homes within walking distance of both the beach and a vibrant main street, lined with galleries and cafes. I'd returned several times since, each visit strengthening the quiet pull I felt toward that simpler, more connected way of living. A place where I might build the next chapter of my life rather than maintaining a shrine to the past. The weekend. After my conversation with Carol, I received an unexpected text message from Derek. "Would you be open to having coffee sometime next week? There's something I'd like to discuss." His carefully worded request, free from the entitled assumption of my time that had once characterized our interactions, represented progress of a sort. I suggested Tuesday morning at Pacific Coffee Shop, our neutral territory. When I arrived, Derek was already seated at a corner table, dressed more casually than I'd seen him in months, jeans and a simple button-down rather than his usual business attire. He stood as I approached, a gesture of respect that hadn't always been present in our recent interactions. "Mom," he greeted me, his expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I replied, setting my purse on an empty chair and signaling to the server. After ordering our drinks, his usual complicated espresso concoction, my simple tea, Derek cleared his throat. "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few months," he began. "About our relationship, about my behavior, about patterns. I've developed that aren't healthy." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Vanessa suggested I talk to someone professionally," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "A therapist who specializes in control issues and family dynamics. I've been seeing Dr. Brenner for about 6 weeks now." This was unexpected. Derek had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary emotional indulgence for people who lacked the discipline to solve their own problems. "That takes courage," I said sincerely, "both to recognize the need and to act on it." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It was that, or lose my marriage. Vanessa made it pretty clear those were the options. Still, I persisted, many people would choose denial over growth, even at that cost. Our drinks arrived, providing a momentary respite from the intensity of the conversation. Derek added his usual 3 packets of sugar to his coffee, a habit from childhood that had survived all his adult sophistication. "Anyway," he continued after taking a sip, "one of the things Dr. Brenner and I have been discussing is making amends. Not just apologizing, but actually trying to repair some of the damage I've caused." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I know I hurt you, Mom, not just financially but emotionally. I betrayed your trust in fundamental ways." The frank acknowledgement, free from excuses or qualifications, caught me off guard. This was not the carefully worded pseudo-apology I'd grown accustomed to from Derek when he needed something. "Yes," I said simply. "You did." "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness," he clarified, "or even expecting that our relationship can go back to what it was before. But I am hoping we can start rebuilding something healthier." I nodded slowly, cautiously optimistic, but wary of premature hope. "I'd like that too, Derek. But it would require real change, not just good intentions." "I know." He hesitated, then reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a folder. That's partly why I wanted to meet today. This is something concrete I've been working on. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a formal document titled Investment Amplification Agreement. What is this? I asked, scanning the first page. Your original investment in Future Fund has grown substantially with the company's success, Derek explained. But I've been thinking about the opportunity cost, what that money might have earned if you'd invested it elsewhere during these years. This agreement supplements your equity stake with additional shares that reflect not just the growth of your initial investment, but compensatory growth for the delay in formally recognizing it. I read more carefully, stunned by what I was seeing. The document increased my equity from 5% to 7%, representing a significant additional value given the company's current valuation following the Westridge investment. Derek, this is substantial. He nodded. It's fair. Actually, Jason helped me calculate what would be truly equitable. He's been... Derek paused, searching for the right words. He's been a good influence, reminding me of our original mission when I get too focused on growth metrics or exit strategies. I continued reading, noting the clean, straightforward language. No hidden clauses, no manipulative terms, just a clear supplemental investment agreement that had already been approved by the board according to the signatures on the final page. This doesn't obligate you to anything additional, Derek added. No more investor events, no promotional requirements. It's simply recognition of what should have been structured correctly from the beginning. I looked up from the documents, studying my son's face. The calculated charm that had characterized so many of our interactions over the past 2 years was absent. In its place was something I hadn't seen in a long time, genuine remorse and perhaps a tentative hope for reconciliation. Thank you, I said. This is a meaningful step, Derek. He relaxed slightly, shoulders lowering from their tense position. There's something else I wanted to discuss. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Vanessa mentioned you've been looking at real estate listings. I tensed reflexively, preparing for another boundary violation, another attempt to control my housing decisions. But Derek quickly raised his hands in a gesture of reassurance. I'm not trying to influence your decision, he clarified. Whatever you choose to do with your home is entirely your call. If you do decide to sell, I'd like to offer my help. Not my control, not my decision-making, just practical assistance with whatever you need. The distinction, help versus control, was precisely what I'd tried to explain to him months ago. The fact that he now articulated it himself suggested genuine reflection rather than strategic compliance. I appreciate that offer, I said carefully. I am considering a change, though I haven't made any definite decisions. Derek nodded. Vanessa mentioned you've visited Seaside several times. I have, I acknowledged. There's a small arts community there that appeals to me. It seems like a good fit for you, he said, especially with your watercolor classes going so well. The fact that he knew about my classes, that he'd been paying attention to my new interests without attempting to discourage them as frivolous or unnecessary, as he once might have, registered as another small sign of change. It might be, I agreed, but I'm not rushing into anything. For now, I'm enjoying the exploration process, considering different options, imagining different futures. That makes sense. Derek hesitated, then added, Whatever you decide, I want you to know I support your choices. I haven't always demonstrated that, but I'm working on it. We finished our coffee in relative comfort, discussing future funds, progress, Vanessa's growing confidence in financial matters, and even my watercolor projects. Not the easy warmth of our relationship before his controlling behavior began, but not the tense, calculated exchanges of recent months either. Something new, something cautiously evolving. As we prepared to leave, Derek paused. Mom, there's one more thing. Jason and I have been developing a new educational component for Future Fund, a series of financial literacy workshops designed specifically for seniors. Given your background in education, we thought, well, would you consider reviewing the curriculum, strictly as a consultant with proper compensation for your time, no obligation? The request surprised me, not just the acknowledgement of my professional expertise, which Derek had often minimized in recent years, but the clear, boundary-respecting framing, proper compensation, consultant status, no obligation. I'd be interested in learning more, I said. Send me the materials and proposed terms, and I'll consider it. Derek nodded, genuine pleasure lighting his features. Great. I'll have them sent over this week. As we walked to our cars, an awkward moment arose, the traditional farewell hug that had once been automatic between us now feeling uncertain, loaded with the weight of recent history. Derek solved the dilemma by offering his hand instead, a gesture that acknowledged both our current distance and his respect for my boundaries. I took it, feeling the firm grip of the businessman he'd become while remembering the small boy whose hand had once trustingly held mine crossing countless streets. Thank you for meeting today, he said formally, and for considering the investment adjustment. Thank you for initiating it, I replied. It matters, Derek, not just the equity itself, but the recognition it represents. He nodded, understanding. My meaning, it's a start. Yes, I agreed, a start. Driving home, I reflected on our conversation, cautious hope mingling with hard-earned wisdom. Derek was making efforts, genuine ones it seemed, to address his controlling behaviors and repair the damage he'd caused. The investment adjustment, his respect for my housing exploration, his acknowledgement of my professional expertise, all represented meaningful steps toward healthier interaction. But I remembered Elaine's warning that establishing boundaries would be an ongoing process, not a one-time event. Trust, once broken, could not be instantly restored, even with sincere apologies and concrete amends. It would take time, consistency, continued respect for established boundaries before I could fully relax my vigilance. The next morning, I called a realtor recommended by one of my watercolor classmates, a woman who specialized in helping seniors transition to new living situations. I wasn't ready to list my home yet, but I wanted professional guidance as I explored options in Seaside. I'd like to look at properties in the Cove area, I explained. Small homes, ideally walking distance to both the beach and the Arts District. I know exactly the type of property you're looking for, she assured me. When would you like to schedule some viewings? I thought about my calendar, the financial literacy curriculum Derek would be sending for review, my twice-weekly watercolor, classes, lunch with Carol, a planned day trip with Vanessa to visit a gallery featuring some of Mr. Chen's work. Next Tuesday would work well, I decided. I'll drive out in the morning. After ending the call, I spent some time in my garden, deadheading roses and pulling the occasional weed. The Japanese maple Robert had planted was in its summer glory, leaves a deep burgundy against the blue sky. I felt a momentary pang at the thought of leaving this tree behind, of entrusting it to new caretakers. But as I worked, I realized something important. The memories associated with this tree, Robert's joy in planting it, our shared delight as it grew, the countless mornings we'd enjoyed coffee beneath its spreading branches. Those memories weren't contained in the tree itself. They lived within me, transportable to any new location, any new chapter I might create. My phone chimed with a text message from the gallery owner in Seaside. Just received new watercolor set you asked about. Reserved for you, no rush. Smiled, picturing the professional-grade paints and brushes I'd admired during my last visit. An investment in my developing artistic practice that I'd decided to make once I'd determined whether the move to Seaside was right for me. The decision to purchase that watercolor set, like the decision to explore coastal properties, to consider consulting on Future Fund's educational curriculum, to cautiously rebuild a healthier relationship with my son, each represented something profound that had been restored to me through the difficult confrontation 3 months ago. The freedom to choose my own path forward, to make decisions based on my own values and priorities, to invest in the life I wanted to create. The credit cards Derek had once monitored now reflected my choices, not his approval. The bank accounts he had once controlled now supported my priorities, not his judgment of what was necessary or appropriate for a woman my age. The home he had secretly planned to sell might indeed be sold, but on my timeline, through my decision-making process, with the proceeds supporting my next chapter rather than his definition of what that chapter should be. Financial independence had restored much more than monetary autonomy. It had returned my sense of self, my dignity, my right to self-determination. The path forward wasn't entirely clear. Relationships still needed healing, trust still needed rebuilding, new ventures still needed exploration, but it was my path to navigate, guided by my own wisdom and experience rather than someone else's control. I gathered my gardening tools and headed inside, already mentally planning what to pack for my upcoming trip to Seaside. Whatever the future held, a coastal cottage filled with artwork, a consulting role sharing educational expertise, a gradually healing relationship with my son, I would face it from a position of strength, independence, and hard-won wisdom about the importance of maintaining both financial autonomy and healthy boundaries with those we love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.